Hello there, and welcome back to Gundam Lore. As I'm recording this, we are in the midst of a huge snowstorm across the United States, and I can hear the snow pitter-patter on my window, which is really not normal for me down here in Texas, but it's very cozy vibes, and I'm having a great time. I hope you're all being very safe and stuff and enjoying your snow day. But if you're seeing this video as it's coming out, the long wait is half over. Hathaway, The Sorcery of Nymph Circe, the second movie in the Hathaway trilogy, is finally out, and you, like me, really don't want to wait a couple of years to see how this whole story shakes out. But luckily for both of us, Tomino actually wrote these as a series of novels back in 1989 and finished up in 1990. So the end of the story has been out there for decades at this point. I got into Gundam back in like 2017, I think, so I've definitely not been waiting for this as long as some of you have, but I know some of you have been waiting to see this movie adaptation since 1989, and I am so happy that you finally got to see it. I know some of you have been having to wait for this movie since 1989, and if you have only watched the animated stuff, I do not know how you had the restraint, because the second that I watched the first Hathaway movie, I dropped everything and was like, I gotta go read all three of these books right now. So, big spoiler warning, I'm going to be telling you everything that happens in book 3, so that you don't have to wait. I don't know how many years it's gonna be before movie 3, probably less than between 1 and 2, but I digress. Here we are. Let's talk about what happens in Hathaway, part 3. So Hathaway book 2 ends with Hathaway and Gigi being reunited. I'm assuming the movie ends the same way, but what happens after that? Our story opens back in Adelaide. Kenneth is being briefed that Gigi has been abducted by Mafty forces, but he doesn't have long to think about this because Mafty is broadcasting again, and the world is listening. A bright light obscures most of the young man's looks as Mafty outlines everything that is wrong with the Federation. He says they're corrupt, and you need no further evidence than the ministers meeting this very week, where they'll be voting on a bill that will allow the Federation government to seize lands from citizens with proper residence permits at their own discretion. Then, the citizen will be allowed to claim an area of land in a space colony of the owner's choice, equal to the value of the land taken away. This is sort of like the modern-day legal concept of eminent domain, but Mafty's point is that the Federation higher-ups are trying to deport everybody that they view as lesser, kind of the peasant class, back to the colonies, and they want to make a private walled garden out of the earth, only for the aristocracy, the Federation higher-ups, and their family members. We, as the viewers, especially if you've watched all of Gundam up to this point chronologically, we have this understanding that the colonies kind of suck. They don't have actual, self-elected governments. The Federation chooses the governments for them, chooses all of their officials. They don't have the right to vote on their own people.
歴史をそのように理解できる君なら、宇宙移民が機民政策であったことも分かっているな。サイドごとの自治が認められてはいても、市長の任命権限は中央政府に独占されている。その中央政府の選挙権も与えられないというのでは。
So the colonies are kind of just falling further and further behind, and this kind of makes it so that there is no equivalent exchange that can really take place here. Land on Earth is never going to be equal to land in the colonies, because everybody's souls are bound to Earth, gravity draws us all back to Earth, and everybody wants to come back to Earth instead of moving to the colonies. So that's why he feels like this is very, very corrupt, and why this has to be stopped pretty much at all costs. This is also all on the back of the more privileged families, like I said, the Federation kind of higher-ups families, all returning to Earth, which is what we see on the Hanjin. I probably am not pronouncing that correctly, at the beginning of Hathaway Part 1, despite Earth having not started to heal. The oceans and rain are still polluted, animal habitats are still being destroyed, and pretty much all of Char's worries from Char's counterattack are still around. We haven't really done any of the fixing that Amuro hoped for. Mafty ends the broadcast by saying that the Federation ministers will also use this meeting to declare that Mafty, as an organization, must be eliminated at all costs. And Hathaway feels like this is a good and just thing, because Mafti are terrorists after all, and that kind of violence really can't be tolerated in a civilized society. It's just unfortunate that this is how things are. So he takes this chance to formally declare war on the Earth Federation, and announces that civilians have 2 hours to leave the city of Adelaide. Anyone fleeing after that will be killed as the ministers are purged. You're gonna see me put several things on screen in quotes, and if I do that, that means it is a direct quote from the book. Given this is an unofficial translation, but I would say it still counts. I also think it's really interesting that Hathaway thinks that declaring war on Mafti is totally the sensible thing to do, and he doesn't blame them at all. It's kind of like the way that, to me, Gundam has always been, that it's people on different sides with different ideals, and they don't necessarily fully hate each other. They just have opposing ideas, and they're in conflict with each other. Obviously, the Federation higher-ups, I would agree, are corrupt, but I also understand why they can't just let somebody like Mafti come in and run rampant and do whatever they want. And it's interesting to me that Hathaway feels that way too, despite, leading them and being Mafti. But Kenneth watches this whole broadcast, and despite the light masking Hathaway, Kenneth recognizes him immediately, and kind of admires him. The novel explicitly says, having friends who excelled only made them more valuable treasures to boast about. Kenneth was beginning to harbor such complex feelings towards Hathaway. He kind of feels like Hathaway is right. If all these measures pass, the immigration to Earth will increase tenfold as those privileged families come back, and humanity's efforts in space, the whole colony project to let Earth take a break and heal, will all come to nothing. Kenneth understands that. It's also here that Kenneth meets with the General Chief of Staff of the Earth Federation Space Forces, and his name is General Medinum Guggenheim, which is a fantastically Tomino name, and Guggenheim promotes Kenneth to Commodore, giving him more authority over pretty much any situation he's gonna be in, which is great because Kimberly, his predecessor, really didn't do much to set Adelaide up for success. Guggenheim also informs Kenneth that the famous Captain Bright is being sent here as reinforcements, in case the conflict is still ongoing when he can get here. I think we'll set that up in movie 2. Maybe we saw that today. I don't know. I've seen some trailers and stuff that have Bright in them, so I think we're gonna set that up in movie 2. But if we don't do that, just know that that happened in book 2, and this is just kind of reminding you of that. So to recap, just in chapter 1, Kenneth learns all about who Hathaway actually is, he has all of his suspicions confirmed, and Hathaway lays out what Mafti's goals are and why for the entire world. I promise the entire book is not that dense, but man is it a dense chapter 1. Kenneth goes to try to reassure the ministers that everything is under control, and they talk about Quacksalver, which is the main benefactor behind Mafti. The fact that Mafti knows about all these bills being voted on means that some minister somewhere is leaking this information to them. And Kenneth suspects that whoever this is may be a minister that's part of these meetings. He considers that it could be a minister that flees early, but then he remembers that they blew up a hotel while Hathaway was in it, so he knows they're skilled enough to not hit their own man. I do think, though, that he kind of ignores the idea that Mafti members feel very strong about their cause, and they are clearly willing to die for it. Like, this Quacksalver guy, despite being the funds and a lot of the resources behind Mafti, would probably die for the cause and just be willing to be blown up if that's what it came to. Kenneth is also thoroughly unimpressed by all of the ministers he talks to. He feels like democracy has led to more of a hereditary system, where some families stay in power far too long, because the masses just recognize them and vote for them. After this scene, we jump to Hathaway's perspective, as he has a nightmare about Quest Pariah. You know, the blue-haired girl from Char's counterattack. Quest taunts him and calls him a vile murderer. So why is Hathaway dreaming about Quest calling him a murderer? There's a difference here between the animated version of events and the novel version of events, so I'll explain that real quick. If you watch the movie version of Char's counterattack, it is Amuro's girlfriend, Chan, who ultimately shoots Quest Pariah and kills her. Hathaway then in anger kills Chan.
そんなことわからないから大人って地球だって平気で消せるんだ。
You know, like the whole new type thing, he was very bonded with Quest, so I kind of get it, and it also is supposed to echo Amuro and Lala, Camille and Four. We do this plotline a surprisingly high amount of times, and I honestly think that still kind of flows here. I can understand why he would be dreaming about Quest, and she would be calling him a murderer for shooting Chan, but the novel version, which Tomino is going off of more, I think, does not play out that way. The novel version, called Char's Counterattack, Beltorchica's Children, which is also getting a full manga release in the States right now, so go pick that up if you haven't yet. In the novel version, it's actually Hathaway who shoots Quest instead of Chan. Chan, I don't think exists. I've not read that novel yet, but I think Chan just totally does not exist as a character. So that's why Quest shows up and calls him a murderer in his dreams. He's very torn up about having killed her himself. But after she calls him a murderer, Hathaway tells her, "The sad remnant of the woman who loved Char Aznable dares to judge me." He wakes up in a tent to see Gigi looking at him. She heard him talking in his sleep, and so she comforts him and they talk for a while. They talk about all sorts of stuff. About new types, and life, and sex lives, and what it all means, and what it's all for. It's really interesting, and in part because of this scene, I would really encourage you to go read the novel. Tomino is just a really interesting writer and a really interesting mind, and I think he's kind of showing us a look into that here. And he's really embodying the way that young people kind of talk about the nature of the world and why things work the way they do. I think it's just fantastic. The scene is great, and it all culminates in Gigi telling Hathaway that she feels like he's using this Mafti movement and this Mafti identity to flee from the memory of Quest, and that that's just sort of what humans do, and that she's also endeared to him in kind of that way. She obviously doesn't know this, but that's really in line with the previous Gundam boys, isn't it? Amuro runs from the soul of Lala by refusing to go back to space through Zeta. Camille runs from the memory of Four for a while. It's just what you do. Their talk turns contentious, though, as Gigi questions if Hathaway can really bring about the kind of changes that he wants this way, and he tells her to just get out. Before leaving, though, she tells him that he may have the potential to be a new type, and he tells her, "If I could see through people like a god, I could predict their path. I sold my body because I couldn't do that." It's here that I'm going to analyze Hathaway a little bit, kind of the way that Gigi is trying to. I do think she's kind of right that he is using this Mafti persona and this movement to run from Quest's death. I also think, though, that it's because his father, Bright, was really not present in most of his life. We've seen what Bright has done. We've been along with him in all these journeys. And I think that Hathaway, probably what he took from that, whether he meant to or not, is that the way that you are a great man is that you do military conquests. You work with a bunch of scrappy new types to achieve a big change in society, or to shape a war, shape a conflict. So that's just kind of what he knows, because I'm sure everybody around him tells him how great of a man his dad is, how great that, you know, he's had to live his entire life in the shadow of the great Captain Bright Noah, but he has barely really spent time with the man. So I think this is also just how he processes that. And as far as being a new type, I kind of agree with Hathaway here too, and I'm very much going against the grain. I did some research, and the wikis call him a new type. A lot of the games that he's in classify him as a new type, but if you actually read the novels, there's not a whole lot that backs that up, and I'm really curious if movie 2 is going to do that, because I don't feel like movie 1 does that either. A lot of the new type magic that we've come to expect is really not present in Hathaway. He doesn't see the spirits of his past relations and stuff, he just dreams about them the way that a normal person would. The only evidence we really have that Hathaway is a new type is that he's pretty skilled in the Zhai Gundam. But, like, is that enough? For me, I say no. Now, I know that, like, I'm probably just wrong here, because there's maybe interviews and stuff, or I'm sure the people that classified him as a new type in the games asked, and were told that by Sunrise, that yes, he is. But I had to make a note here that I'm just not so sure that's accurate. I personally think, after reading all 3 of the novels, that Tomino kind of leaves it ambiguous whether Hathaway is a new type or not on purpose, but you can fight me about that in the comments if you want to. Anyway, Hathaway kicks Gigi out, and the other Mafty soldiers take care of her for the night. We get a little bit more romance between Raymond and Emeralda, and Hathaway rallies the troops, which make fun of him for not putting the moves on Gigi last night. Hathaway takes it in stride and decides that he's gonna win her over and fully take her heart from Kenneth after this last operation. He's thinking about her a lot as he takes off for Adelaide to begin the attack. But there's also whispers about a beam barrier being deployed to defend Adelaide. However, a beam barrier apparently hasn't ever been used planetside. Kimberly also didn't set it up. So it's not clear that that's ever gonna actually materialize. There's also this weird plot point that kind of gets dropped on us that, like, we see it from Kenneth's perspective, that Mafty blows up a couple of their mobile suits themselves. They just, like, detonate them. And the Federation really doesn't know what to make of that. They assume that Mafty is just inept and blew them up on accident. And I think Hathaway did that because he wanted them to be demoralized and just be like, oh, these guys are idiots, and work slower. And it definitely works. They are working slower back in Adelaide because they're like, these are a bunch of scrubs, who cares? Back on the Federation side, they're also talking a lot about this false Gundam thing. They use this term over and over, the false Gundam. Mafty has the false Gundam, the fake Gundam. And I think here we should discuss that theme as well. I think the Federation always refers to the Jai Gundam as fake or false, because the Gundam in-universe is seen as a symbol of change and righteousness. A Gundam has been at the heart of pretty much every large political conflict, and big changes happen whenever they get involved. It's a whole lot easier on both the war front and the propaganda front if Mafty doesn't actually have a Gundam, which makes it really, really suck when Hathaway, in the Jai Gundam, soars at Mach 2, which is faster than anybody ever thought was possible in atmosphere for a mobile suit in its actual standard form, and he appears over the Adelaide airport with a huge barrage of missiles that cripples a ton of their mobile suits and weapons. This is how the Battle of Adelaide officially begins. Gauman Nobile leads a follow-up attack as Hathaway has spent his arsenal and he pulls back. We switch here to the perspective of Lane Aim in the Penelope, and we get to watch in horror as he does his best, but the Gauman crew are able to attack the Adelaide Festival Center where the ministers are meeting. Half of the Federation ministers are now dead. Lane is very frustrated that the Jai Gundam is better technologically than anything the Federation has, and he's constantly arguing with himself. He wonders if Gigi is actually the guardian deity of Mafty. But that's dumb. But Kenneth kind of believes it. But Kenneth got promoted when she wasn't here. But things are going in Mafty's favor. But you make your own luck in this world. He's really not sure about all this, but he breaks off and zooms back to the airport, just in time to blow up Emeralda. Rip to our secondary romance plot, I guess. I'm very curious how she's going to be handled in the movies and stuff, because in the books, a lot of the Mafty crew is just not very fleshed out. They're not super long books, and I feel like that's kind of a downside, that we're not able to have the time to flesh out a lot of these characters. But it does seem like in the trailers for the second movie that they are actually going to be fleshing out these characters more. So, sorry if that ends up being really heart-wrenching now. We pick back up here with Kenneth as he's meeting with Chief Hundley Yoksan. He's set up in Book 2 if you don't remember, or if the movie didn't really show him. Remember, I'm making this before I've seen the movie. Yoksan is the director of the criminal police organization in Adelaide. So he's sort of the police commissioner, I guess. He's very high up in the chain of command for defending Adelaide. Yoksan says it's a tragedy that all those ministers were killed, and Kenneth sort of wonders aloud if the new people filling their shoes will do any better at their jobs than they did. And while I think it is a valid point and a valid thought to have, it is very much the wrong time to vocalize it. They just went up in a cloud of smoke, their bodies are still burning. It is in very poor taste to start saying things like that right now. Yoksan feels similar and says the statement borders on being pro-Mafty, which is also a valid reaction from him. But then he asks if there's been any couriers, journalists, or blue-collar workers recently arrested for being potentially pro-Mafty. Him and Kenneth debate this, and it's really hard to figure out who is speaking. But basically, they put their heads together and they wonder if they can get all of these people out that were even potentially pro-Mafty. Not that they are, but they're suspected of being pro-Mafty. They want to get all these people out of their jail cells and march them around the festival grounds to possibly dissuade Mafty attacking again. He basically wants to use hostages as shields. And I think this is kind of another tick in the Mafty column, that it's like the Federation, despite being the ones with authority, are not doing good things here. I think it's also supposed to be a callback to the way that Kenneth uses Gauman as a hostage, putting him in Lane's cockpit in Hathaway Part 1. Kenneth does realize how this looks, though, and he tells Yaksan that such tales make one more inclined towards Mafty. To which Yaksan says, "Utter that again, and I'll have you arrested for treason and subject you to a clandestine trial." So, we're just doing great here. It's not explicitly stated here, but I think this is also where Kenneth is really starting to form thoughts and feelings about the Federation. Yeah, he's used hostages as shields himself in the past, but Yaksan is basically saying, if you talk back to me again, you won't even get a fair trial. I'm just going to disappear you and you'll be replaced immediately. Juxtapose that with Mafty's broadcast warning of their imminent attack and telling all the citizens, you have a couple of hours to clear out. Mafty is definitely, in this case, behaving a lot more honorably than the Federation is, and I think Kenneth is starting to see that. The first phase of the attack is over. Mafty retreats to a secret valley about 30 miles from Adelaide and regroups. They've lost 2 Galsazons and 6 Messers so far, but Hathaway says that's within expected losses. Which sounds like a really cold thing to say, but I do think that Hathaway is being a decent leader here, and that it's like, well, we're not so deluded that we're not going to take losses. We need to plan for how much is acceptable for us to keep going on with our next step of the plan. The plan now is one final bombing of Adelaide to ensure a safe retreat for the second Owen Belly Mafty guys, led by Fabio, and also to create chaos so that any Mafty agents in the city can safely escape. To do this, they want to hit the festival grounds and the Adelaide airport each one more time. The only way Mafty is going to retreat before their objective is complete is if their forces are reduced to 1 single Galsazon and 2 Messers, in which case it'd be assumed that the Gundam has also been shot down already. So it's not like Hathaway is only planning for the deaths of his men, he also has a plan in place for if he is gone as well. It's also at this time that Hathaway gives the order to dump Kimberly, his men, and Gigi. They're a ways from town, but there's roads nearby and he knows they'll be fine. They just have to work their way through a little forest area to the road. Gauman questions this choice because Kimberly and Gigi both probably have a decent amount of value as hostages, but Hathaway tells him that leaving Kimberly behind showcases Mafty's mercy. It shows their humanity, and that'll be a victory for Mafty regardless. Then, Gigi's purpose is a reminder for Kenneth to stay vigilant. Gauman starts to worry that that sounds a little bit like a suicide mission, but they talk a little bit more and each reassure each other that that's not what this is supposed to be. Then Hathaway and Gauman part ways. And it's after that conversation that we get the best characterization of Gauman that the story has for us. As he zooms off, Gauman realizes that he's a middle-aged man with no one to mourn his death. Not really. And he doesn't want to die before he finds a woman and has kids, because that's what all of this has been for. To me, this sums up what Mafty is really all about. Zeon failed, the Aeug failed. Neo-Zeon failed twice. The good guys, the Federation, have always come out on top of every conflict, and now we're down to a small group of people who really don't want to be doing what they're doing. The fact of the matter is that even when the Federation wins, things don't improve. They just continue to deteriorate, and people that have joined Mafty feel like there's no other way forward. If they want the Earth to eventually heal, they have to take drastic measures. It's sort of the same reason that Neo-Zeon does what they do under Char, but reinforced even more, because, all of humanity witnesses miracles at the end of Char's counterattack, and stuff doesn't get better. We get to the end of Gundam Unicorn, and we do the Laplace's box incident, and things still really don't get better. At this point, what else is there, from their perspective? Kenneth hopes that there will be a second Mafty attack, and he sets a trap with the Penelope, now stripping it of a ton of armor to be faster. He also deploys some other mobile suits and the beam barrier that is finally coming online after all this time. He's been working on this thing for what feels like weeks at this point, and that's only after he took over. Kimberly was supposed to begin this, so it's taken a long time to set this thing up. The beam barrier has the power to bring down a normal mobile suit already, but Kenneth orders its output to be doubled. He doesn't care that this will fry the thing beyond repair. If Mafty gets away, or God forbid, they've already left after the first successful attack, the day will be a huge victory for the Mafty movement. Lucky for Kenneth, Mafty does come back. Several targets show up on radar, and Lane charges into battle with the Penelope and a squad of Gustav Karls, which Hathaway instantly shoots down. They are no match for him. The Zhai Gundam whips by, and Hathaway successfully puts a volley of missiles into the airport, but Lane catches up, and it's a clash of the Gundams. They lock beam sabers a few times, their funnels are shooting at each other, it's all pretty intense. Meanwhile, the Gauman crew attacks the festival center, and one of his wingmen, Fencer, is shot down, but he crashes right next to the festival center, and his fusion engine goes critical, which levels that part of the city. His other wingman, Gulf, broke for the airport, which he sees is void of viable targets already, and he is also shot down. His fusion reactor also goes critical, and the book says Adelaide as a whole, at this point, is devoid of any towering structures. So the city of Adelaide kind of looks like Godzilla's been there. I mean, there is nothing tall left standing. Kenneth is also livid with his own soldiers not checking their fire here, and shooting these guys down in ways that are causing even more destruction. Hathaway and Lane are still battling mid-air, and Hathaway is able to use his beam saber to destroy the Penelope's beam rifle. Lane turns and runs. Hathaway pursues, but there's a large flash of light as the barrier fires and envelops the Gundam. The Zhai Gundam is electrified and it falls to the ground, landing in a forest. Its glowing eyes fade. Lane descends with his beam saber and carves up the Zhai Gundam's energy tubes and thrusters. He grabs his pistol and pops out of the cockpit, descending on a rope, and upon opening the Zhai Gundam's cockpit, he's hit with a burning smell. He reaches out cautiously to lift the pilot's helmet, and is shocked that he recognizes the scorched face underneath. It's the same young man he saw with the Circe unit back in Davao. But can Kenneth be a Mafty accomplice? It does kind of suggest that. Either way, the Battle of Adelaide is over. I do find it really interesting here that that is the first thing that enters Lane's mind, because he's seen this guy hanging out with Kenneth a couple times, and what else is he supposed to think? Like, this is all just a coincidence? We as the audience know, yes, it kind of is, but I think that's kind of cool that we get to see that, even though we don't really see Lane's perspective anymore from here to the end of the book, so that's kind of the last part we leave Lane on. Hathaway wakes up in a hospital room. Kenneth is standing over him. He tells him it's been 4 days, and gets Hathaway some water. Hathaway asks if it would have been different without the barrier, and Kenneth tells him that Lane did admit defeat, and was grateful for the experience in battling him. He also says he probably should have upped the barrier's power even more, but he couldn't bring himself to kill the pilot. It's here that Kenneth asks the question that I've had on my mind for a long time, and you might have as well. He asks Hathaway, who is Quacksilver? Who is the man or woman that is behind Mafty, that planned all this out, that financed it all, and are they significant? You know, I've been wondering this whole time, is this somebody that we know? And Hathaway's answer is, to be fully honest, I have never met that person. I don't know who it is. We've seen his perspective, and he genuinely has no idea. Which might be kind of disappointing, and I'm curious if the movie is going to go that route as well, but I think it fits with the rest of the Gundam universe that, like, it's probably just some politician somewhere. It's probably like another Commodore Blex or a Mr. Wong somewhere. It's somebody that really is not very consequential to the rest of the story. Kenneth tells Hathaway that Gigi also came to visit him recently, but he slept through it. There will be a formal interrogation later, but for now, Hathaway falls back asleep. The interrogation, however, is a lie, and Kenneth is keeping that from Hathaway. It was decided the day before he woke up that there will be no official interrogation. Mafty is to be executed with no trial and no questions asked. Kenneth, feeling really strongly about it, has also submitted his resignation to the Federation forces. I think Kenneth resigns because he feels like he's done his duty as a soldier, he's tried to defend the city, and really, given his circumstances, he's done a fairly decent job. He did win. There were huge losses as well, but he did win. I think this is Kenneth kind of coming full circle back to the conflict at the beginning of the book, that he kind of feels like Mafty has some points. The Federation is not doing a great job preserving life of pretty much anybody, and he feels like that this is not going to go very well. I also think he feels like he's done his duty. He defended the city to the best of his ability. Everybody around him is pretty incompetent outside of characters like Lane Aim, and I think he's just kind of done with it. If he is going to fight this hard to preserve something that nobody else seems to care about, why keep doing it? He really put the team on his back, and they threatened to disappear him. I don't think he really appreciated that. Kenneth, still caught up in his frustrations, leaves the hospital and walks across the street to the mansion that the Cerisse unit is using as a command post, only to come face to face with Captain Bright Noah, who has finally arrived. Bright asks if Kenneth was able to get any useful intel, and Kenneth tells him that Mafty is unexpectedly mature for his age. Bruh, I cried here. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, it is such an emotional moment. Bright is across the street from his son, who is badly injured and has no idea. And I'm just like, this man and his family have been through so much. Bright has given the Federation, and just humanity as a whole, so much of himself. And just to be put in this situation is heartbreaking. I just don't want to see Bright get hurt anymore. They joke together about Kenneth's resignation being accepted, while Bright's so far has been ignored. If you remember back to Unicorn, he was trying to resign already back then. And it's been several years. Kenneth actually tells Bright that there's rumors in the Federation ranks about his resignation, that it's been ignored because he had Amuro and Camille under his command. And Bright is supposed to be kept close to use the new types under his command as a shield in case of a new type uprising within the Federation forces. And I think that's really interesting and kind of telling that the Federation worries about a new type uprising, that it's like, well, why would they want to do that? And then they also think that Bright can just summon Amuro or Camille or maybe Judo, whoever these new types are, they do kind of seem to find their way to Bright. And that he's going to essentially make some sort of super squad that's going to defend the Federation to the last. They part ways for the time being, though, and Kenneth goes on to meet with General Guggenheim again, and is informed that Bright will actually be Kenneth's successor in the region. Kenneth, at this point, is really overwhelmed, and tells him, "This matter is too heavy for me to keep to myself. I need your discretion, General. The current Mafty is Hathaway Noah." And the General is like, does his father know this? He's actually kind of freaked out by this, and then he realizes that it's a really good thing that Kenneth is about to preside over that execution tomorrow, and not his successor. But if Kenneth resists, it's going to be Bright presiding over the execution of his own son. And they both would really like to avoid that coming to pass. I cannot even imagine, and it is insane that we are in this situation. I'm laughing because it's so sad. All the emotions. Bright is also going to be allowed to retire in 3 months. I don't know if the second movie is going to cover this, but this is his last deployment, they have assured him, and then he's opening a restaurant on Side 1 with Mirai, so that's sort of the background here. It's now that we get one of my absolute favorite scenes in this entire series. Gundam just, the way Tomino writes, he is a master, just the emotions and stuff. Alright, y'all ready for this scene? Because here we go. Bright decides to use his leisure time and goes to see the Jai Gundam that Mafty was piloting. It's noted that the outstretched arms gave the Gundam a crucifix-like silhouette. Their ends, charred and mangled, conveyed a painful sight. The mechanic working on it asks, "Isn't it unsettling that these insurgents are using a mobile suit bearing the name Gundam?" Bright looks up at the Gundam and tells the mechanic, "Not particularly. Historically, Gundams, even those within the Federation, were always piloted by individuals with a rebellious spirit, and the end for a Gundam has always been somewhat tragic. They're decapitated, scorched, and torn apart, but that rebellious spirit, it always persists even long after the Gundam is gone." Tomino knew exactly what he was doing, and it's such a beautiful scene, and I can't wait until it's animated. Like, just the thought of, like, Bright, you know, saying these things about his own son, having no idea that that's who he's talking about, and also being totally right. Like, it's so good. The next day, soldiers come to Hathaway's room to inform him of his imminent execution. It'll be carried out by firing squad tomorrow morning. They also tell him, "We express respect for your valiant efforts as a warrior. This is a message from Commodore Kenneth Slegg and his Sorcery unit." Hathaway isn't terribly bothered. He knew things could end this way, and he feels like maybe that's why he was so cold to Gigi. He also thinks about Caria and regrets not seeing her again either. The whole thing with Caria is kind of weird. It's another thing that, like, the books vaguely touch on. He kind of has this relationship with her, but not really. It's kind of touch and go, and it's more one-sided from her perspective. Book 2 actually has a quote where she is kind of flirting with Hathaway, and he thinks to himself, she's kind of like a boy. He really is not into her very much, but the movies seem to be kind of, at least from the trailers of the second one, seem to be kind of leaning into this relationship more, and I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit less one-sided in the movies. There's also a funny little moment here where Hathaway interrupts the guards and he's like, "Wait, Commodore Slegg?" And they're like, "Yeah, he got a promotion." And Hathaway's like, "Oh, well that's good. Good for him." I love that, like, despite the rivalry and stuff, that these two do kind of develop this mutual respect for each other and this friendship. The nurse comes by and asks if Hathaway would like a word processor to write his will. It's kind of funny to me that this is the second time that Hathaway has been asked to write his will, and he doesn't do it this time either, because he would have to sign his name to actually have it, like, reach anyone, and he doesn't want to do that to his family. Instead, he just asks for an apple as a final meal. The nurses take really good care of him and clearly respect him deeply. He asks if they'll help him practice standing, and they tell him he really shouldn't, but he's obviously going to have to in a few hours. I think this is a really beautifully written scene as well. I'm actually a caregiver by trade, and I work with hospice patients. That's my day job. And I don't usually see my job portrayed at all in media, but Tomino paints a really great picture of it with the nurses that are caring for Hathaway. They get really emotional and really sad, and still try to take really good care of him, knowing that come tomorrow, he's not going to be there anymore. It's a really tough thing to kind of explain, but you kind of take it on yourself as this kind of fight with death, and you're trying to nurse somebody back to health that you know in your heart of hearts is not going to fully recover. And nobody expects you to be able to nurse them back to a full recovery. But when you're feeding someone and helping them wash themselves and, you know, caring for somebody on that intimate of a level, you can't help, I think, but bond with them and really hope and pray that you can pull them out of it. And I think the nurses in this scene really try to do that for Hathaway, knowing full well that it's been decided with a pen and paper that he is not going to be here. It's a very small moment in the book overall, and the nurses are extremely minor characters, but they do get names, and I just really like it, so I wanted to highlight it a little bit. The sun has gone down, and Hathaway is left alone to deal with his thoughts. The book says, "It's because I encountered new types, and aspired to be one, without reflecting on my own capabilities. It wasn't about Quest Pariah, or even the war. Past midnight, such thoughts lined up in Hathaway's mind, but even then they lacked solid logic. Even Gigi seemed to be saying something like that. It was a dream. I must have been dreaming. All this time." I think this goes back to my theory of why he was doing it all. That he's kind of, I think, deeply seeking approval from his dad by being a war hero, despite there not being more wars to fight. He is trying to do what he thinks is the right thing. He's trying to embody that rebellious spirit of the Gundam and what Bright, you know, told him about, because Bright probably raised him on stories about Amuro and Camille and Judo, and now Hathaway has embodied all those stories, and this is sort of what he's become, but it also doesn't really feel real. You know, how would you feel if somebody in an office somewhere had signed a piece of paper that says you're going to die tomorrow, and you have no control over that at this point? Do you feel like you're going to die? Probably not. You probably feel like it's kind of a dream. It's just a day like any other. and nothing is going to change that. You exist, and then you're just not going to. I think as humans, we really struggle to process those feelings. Eventually, 4:30 a.m. rolls around, and it's time to do the deed. Gigi races to the mansion that the execution will be held at, totally distraught, but Kenneth sends her away. They roll Hathaway's hospital bed to the garden out back, and he's tied to a pillar with a spotlight aimed at it. Kenneth asks if he has any last words, and Hathaway tells all those gathered, "As Mafty, I've said what I needed to. I believe that someday, the sound mind of humanity will protect this Earth. Until then, the mistakes made by people will continue to be corrected by Mafty." Kenneth steps forward with a blindfold and whispers to him, "Hath, you know I care about you, right? We'll always be friends, don't forget that." Hathaway tells him, "I won't, Captain," and he's glad that Kenneth is close by. Kenneth clears out of the way, and there's a moment of silence before he whips his riding crop and yells fire. Mafty is dead. Kenneth goes inside the mansion and is greeted by Bright, who has no idea that his world has just forever changed. "How did it go?" he asks Kenneth, who tells him Mafty faced his end with dignity and composure. The strength that Kenneth has to go inside and face Bright immediately after this and keep it together is insane. Can you imagine keeping that kind of secret from someone and having just zero time to process any of it? But Kenneth knows if he slips for even a second, it'll cause immeasurable problems and betray the memory of this guy he respects so much. Kenneth also believes that the Federation will regret executing Mafty here, because the Space Noids will retaliate. He also demands the surrounding officers make sure that Mafty has a proper burial. He fought honorably, and he deserves to be honored that way. It's been a couple of months since I've read this book, and I'm still trying to process my feelings around Hathaway not winning and Mafty being defeated here. I think it's the most difficult to process because I'm used to in Tomino's work that the Gundam boy ultimately wins. Amuro wins. You know, the Federation wins the 1-year war. When we go to Zeta, the Federation doesn't, or the AUG, I guess, doesn't really win. But Camille does move the bar, and Judo ultimately does finish what he started, and he does ultimately win in the end. Char's counterattack, Amuro is able to save the day, and sort of wins. That is his goal. This is the first time along the line that I think a Gundam boy has lost. If you're watching in chronological order, we have Gundam Unicorn, where Banerjee wins, and Yuno Basta in Gundam Narrative also wins. We just don't see the Gundam boy lose, really. So, to get to the end of all of this and have our Gundam boy lose is tough, especially because I'm bringing a lot of my feelings from Bright over into Hathaway. And I know that part of what Tomino was trying to do was to set up Lane Aim to be a sort of darker play on the Gundam boy, that he is the Federation Gundam boy in this story, and he is the antagonist that we're working against. But man, do I not feel that much for him. I don't really want Lane Aim to win at all. I would like Kenneth to win, and I would like good things to happen to Kenneth, but Lane just really doesn't grab me in the same way. He just kind of feels like a tool that the Federation is using to achieve their ends, which ultimately maybe is what Amuro was as well. That's why after the original Gundam, they relegate him to the mansion and don't let him come out. He's just a little tool for them to use when they need him. It's a lot of words, though, to say. I am very sad that Hathaway is gone. Kenneth and Bright part ways, but they do meet up one last time later in the day to finalize the handoff of authority officially. Those eyes, so similar to Hathaway's. Kenneth begins to tear up, and Bright asks him, regrets about the Earth Federation force's methods? But Kenneth waves him off. No, I'll forget it. I'm setting off on a free wandering journey. I've been granted an Earth residency permit, after all. It's not like Kenneth can actually tell Bright exactly what's wrong. Kenneth and Gigi meet up and leave for the airport, but the Sorcery unit is waiting for them when they get there, standing in formation with Lane Aim out at the front. They all salute and present Kenneth with a gift for his leadership. I thought it was kind of weird that they never actually show or mention what the gift is. They just say they give him something. But Kenneth responds in kind by giving Lane his riding crop as he boards the carrier. I'm kind of curious what you guys think that the gift is. I don't know. I guess it's inconsequential, but I'm very curious for when that finally gets animated to see what it is. It's a quiet flight back to Davao. Kenneth gets the pair 2 hotel rooms under an alias, and as he leaves Gigi at her room, he finally asks why she's been so angry with him. She just tells him, "I can't say anything when I think about the sacrifices you've made," and she closes the door. Kenneth goes to his own room and sobs well into the night. I really thought that this is where the book would end. We've finished Hathaway's story, and that's kind of what this book is, so I was like, okay, why are we still going? Buckle up, because we're not done yet. Kenneth is awakened by a banging on the door. Realizing he must have fallen asleep at some point, he opens the door to see a frantic Gigi, who shoves the morning paper at him. "Captain, look at this! It says Hathaway is Mafty!" Kenneth grabs it from her and reads the headlines across the front page. Mafty, executed. Adelaide Circe unit retaliates. The fury of Mafty. Is the Earth Federation government collapsing? Under the headlines, there's an expose detailing the full identity of Mafty and delving into the behind-the-scenes intricacies of the Earth Federation's turmoil, exposing the terrorist leader as the son of a Federation Forces officer. Bright Noah is mentioned by name. The article states that Mafty was executed by Bright Noah, his own father, and quotes General Guggenheim as the source. The article shows Captain Bright as the embodiment of loyalty to the Earth Federation government, highlighting his heroic actions as an unwavering soldier. It also depicts Hathaway, or Mafty Navu Aaron, as having reflected upon the inhumane terrorism carried out as Mafty and accepting his execution with dignity. Before they can even think about it, Kenneth is already on the phone chartering a plane to free Davao, lest he and Gigi get disappeared as loose ends who know the truth. Gigi wonders what'll happen to the Noah family, and Kenneth guesses that Bright will probably be confused and still retire as planned. There's no concrete evidence of anything at this point, and the Federation higher-ups can just say that Mafty leaked the article as a tactic. Bright was planning to go visit Hathaway when he finished his military stint here, because Hathaway is supposedly studying as a botanist nearby. Through all the confusion, though, at worst, Bright is just never going to be able to find his son. The plane that Kenneth charters brings the pair to Taiwan, where they catch another plane to Japan. They don't talk much on the flight, but the pilot has the evening edition of the news, and in it, there's already a Mafty rebuttal. The new headlines read, "Hathaway Noah is a new type with a history of shooting down the mobile suits of Char's rebel army. That's why he, claiming to be Mafty Navu Aaron, took action against the Earth Federation government's policy of disregarding Earth's restoration. Despite this, the Earth Federation government ignored such protests entirely and, as a means of retaliation against Hathaway Noah, forced his father to carry out the execution, an unbelievable act that ignored humanity. So that's not entirely true, but what's left of the Mafty forces, presumably Gallman and Quacksalver, maybe the Fabio unit, they have no clue what really happened to Hathaway, and no real way of finding out. All they can do is go off of the same headlines that Bright has to read. So there's kind of this information warfare that's happening in the aftermath of all this, and, citizens that are just regular people have no way of knowing any of this is true or not true. Gigi is starting to lighten up, though, and she's happy to go to Japan because it's Hathaway's country. She feels like it's sparsely populated, the climate is nice, and she figures that's probably where she'll grow old and die. Kenneth, meanwhile, is thinking to himself about how he's discovered the allure of vulnerability, and how he feels like the role of a man is to protect that. Gigi asks what he'll do next, and he says, even if the current Federation government falls and something new arises, the same organizational flaws will probably surface again. Maybe I'll prepare for the next Mafty. I'd like to create an organization that can revive someone like Char Aznable, Hathaway, or even Amuro. And I don't think he means literally revive them, the way that people have tried to revive Char in the past. I think he means just figuratively revive the legendary ethos of these people. And he wants to be part of whatever the next great movement is that has great people in it. Kenneth also says he'll swing by Mace Flower's apartment, which is the stewardess from the beginning of the first movie who was working on the Hanjin, and apologize to her for being deceived by a young woman. Gigi finds that funny. I assume they'll show this in the second movie, but if they don't get around to it, in the second book, Kenneth has a little bit of a fling with Mace Flower, and Gigi shows up and basically says, I'm the younger, hotter woman, and he definitely prefers me, and she's really vulgar about it, and Mace gets really offended and leaves. As Kenneth and Gigi sit on the plane to Japan, enjoying their last moments together, Gigi imagines that from here on, Hathaway Noah will be known as Mafti Navu Eren, which this whole time they've alluded to meaning something, but in the books they never outright state it until right now. The name means the just king of prophets. She feels like it'll be legendary, even mythical. But for now, the world has to deal with reality. A father's agony, a mother's sorrow, a sister's despair. I'm just going to read the last bit to you word for word. Gigi felt sad. It was for the Count too, and Kenneth sitting next to her, sipping on his expensive water. For a while longer, until the memory of Hathaway's warmth faded. Hard times lay ahead for Gigi. And that is the end of Hathaway's Flash. That's the end of the whole story. It is fantastic, but also really, really dark. I absolutely love it, but man, is it... I just feel so many feelings. It's hard to get it across, but hopefully you understand the feelings that I have as well. So after this, I did some digging because I have to know what's next. It's why I made this channel. I'm doing all that anyway, I might as well tell you all about it. Where do I read about the further adventures of Kenneth? Which manga shows Gigi's happy ending? There's not one. This is the last that we hear about either of them. They don't show up in anything else, at least not yet. The hardest thing for me to accept, though, is the end of Bright's story. I asked a couple of people, where do I go from here? Where do I find what happens to Bright and his family? And this is the end of the road. This is the end of Bright's story. Bright has been with me since episode 6 of The Origin. That's what I started my journey into Gundam with. And he's lived through all of 79, Zeta, Double Zeta. He survived Unicorn. Bright has been the biggest fixture in the Universal Century. Even if every familiar character is absent, somehow Bright is still there. This is the end of Bright's story. The last thing we ever hear about him in universe is that everybody thinks he executed his own son for the glory of the Federation. And that is such a dark ending to such an uplifting character. I kind of am happy to share this with you all and hopefully find some friends to grieve with me on this, because dang is that dark. It is one of the darkest ends to a story that I think I have ever seen. I think that moments like this are why some people say that Gundam eventually kind of evolves into a grimdark kind of thing. Like I said earlier, it's been a couple months since I finished the book, and I am still very much not done processing that this character that has sat with me for years, for some of you, for even longer, I can't imagine being invested in Gundam during, 79, to finally reach the end of the line, and that is the end for Bright. Chronologically, that's the end of his story. Dang. I laugh because it hurts. That's also where I've got to wind down this video. I'll probably make another, or several more in the future, going over all the themes of Hathaway, and what I think about Mafti as an organization, kind of taking it apart even more. But my quick review of the book series, at least, is that it was an absolutely amazing series to read, and it can be really hard to adapt books to the screen, but so far I feel like they've done a fantastic job. I really enjoyed Hathaway Movie 1, and it is looking like Hathaway Movie 2 is going to be fantastic, so I hope it is. I hope that it's pretty faithful to the books, even if Tomino has been, I guess, kind of vocal that he thinks they're a little too faithful to the books, which, I'm not used to that in modern times, but these guys are absolutely killing it, and as soon as they make United States releases for the Blu-rays, I will be buying every single one and watching them over and over. I also really hope I can buy the novel someday and put that on my shelf. I would love an official translation of these. And since they're doing Char's counterattack, Beltorchica's Children, at least the manga, I don't know, maybe we'll get this at some point. What do you guys think of these books, though? And what do you think about this being the end of Bright Noah's story? Are you still grieving that? Did you know that? Or are you just now finding out and you're gonna grieve with me? I'm also curious to know what you guys think about Mafti as an organization. A lot of people feel like Zeon was the bad guys, and then Neo Zeon was the bad guys. Did Mafty finally sway you over where the Federation is the bad guys, or do you still stand with the glorious Federation? Let me know in the comments below. And be nice about it. I know people get pretty heated about those debates, but we all love Gundam here. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to have fun with it all, and I hope you guys are along for that ride. That does it for me today, though. Like I said, I'll have a video coming about my review of the second Hathaway movie as soon as I've seen it, and I'm super excited to cover that. Make sure you support the official Gundam releases wherever you can. I have been Gundam Lore, and I will see you next time.